We shift our focus to this story now. Extortion is a rapidly worsening problem throughout South Africa. A recent report from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime has revealed that the city of Cape Town in particular is increasingly falling under the control of criminal syndicates. Joining us to discuss this is Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime Senior Analyst Jenni Irish-Qhobosheane. Jenni, good afternoon and thank you very much for your time. Now, this report of a worsening extortion problem is beyond worrying. We have reported on extortion in the nightclub space as well as the construction space, but your report now reveals that this is happening in spaza shops and even the transport sector. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, so I think that I just want to point out firstly that I think that Cape Town is the first in a series of extortion reports we are putting together. And I think that it's not just Cape Town that is experiencing this. We're seeing this extortion increase around the country. But what we are seeing is that there are growingly entrenched extortion economies developing. And speaking about Cape Town specifically, in Cape Town we are seeing that there are 4 extortion economies that are operating. Some of them have been operating for quite a long time, but they have expanded their operations, and we are seeing more and more different areas being affected by this extortion. So if you look at the extortion in the CBD nightlife economy, that has existed for some time in Cape Town. Mm-hmm. What we have seen post-COVID, however, is that they have expanded that extortion, that extortion economy has expanded into coffee shops, luxury apartments, etc. So there has been an expansion of it. Mm-hmm. If you look at the taxi industry, for example, I think that extortion has always been a common feature within the taxi industry. We've seen the e-hailing services, we've seen the bus services, and that's not just in Cape Town, etc., facing issues around extortion. What I think we are seeing in Cape Town, which is concerning, is private transport companies as well as even some of the private vehicles being extorted in order to be able to drive through areas controlled by some of the taxis. Then if you look at the construction mafia, I think that is Cape Town is experiencing what is a national trend in terms of construction. That Cape Town projects are being affected in Cape Town similarly to where they're being affected around the country. And then if one looks at what we've called the township enterprise economy, we're seeing that extortion initially started to focus on extortion of foreigners in those areas, and then given the success of those extortion practices, they started to expand it into extorting local South African businesses as well.
This is honestly quite worrying, but just for the benefit of those who might not fully understand the modus operandi of some of these extortion rackets, just talk us through it, that if we are now talking about the expansion going as far as restaurants and foreign nationals, tuck shops, what would some of these people come and say to these people? Is it a protection fee, or they simply just come and say, you need to just pay us?
So it varies from in the different economies, and it varies in terms of, so if you look in the construction mafia, armed men would arrive on your sites and say, we demand, you pay us, or you employ the people we say would need to be employed if you want to continue this construction project. In the city centre, it's much more like a traditional, like we see around the world, more of a traditional protection racketeering that goes on, where they will say, we will provide your security, but pay us to provide that security. And they extort businesses in that way. In some of the townships, whether you're talking about Khayelitsha or whether you're talking about Mitchell's Plain, it's armed men linked to particular gangs that would approach those shops and say, if you want to operate in this area, you pay us a protection fee. They're not necessarily protecting your business, but if you don't pay the fee, then you will see what happens to your business.
My goodness, honestly, and criminals are running amok.
And then in the taxi industry, what you are seeing is them saying, if you want to use our routes and transport people on our routes, pay us a fee. So some of this has been developing over a long period of time, and it has become more entrenched, and it has expanded. I think that we have seen some quite significant arrests of people involved in some of these extortion networks in Cape Town itself, and we have seen So from the policing side, they have set up a task team to begin to deal with this. We have seen some arrests. I think what is important, though, is behind those arrests, we need to be able to make sure that new figures don't emerge within those extortion networks. And I think the city themselves have also taken certain initiatives. They've set up hotlines. They've taken initiatives. So I think there are things being done about it. But I think that the importance about this report is that we are saying that it is becoming an entrenched practice, and it's not just Cape Town being affected by this, as I said earlier. It is becoming an entrenched practice, and international practice shows that once it becomes entrenched, it becomes that much more difficult to deal with. But we are seeing in some areas some successes taking place with regard to dealing with this, but I think a lot more needs to be done.
You're quite generous saying that something is being done, because one would think that if it has expanded or it's now becoming entrenched, particularly in the city of Cape Town, then it means policing has been inadequate.
Look, I do think it's always easier to deal with the extortion economy when it's setting itself up. If you try to deal with it once it's already established, it is a lot harder. And I think in the early days, it would. So if you look at in the city of Cape Town, I think it was allowed over a period of time to become entrenched. If one looks at the construction mafia, in fact, nationally, what you find is that I think if in the early days when the construction mafia first reared its head, if it had been dealt with more effectively then, we might not have had the problems we're having dealing with it now. So I do think that it is always easier to deal with an economy when it is emerging than once it is entrenched. And I think there have been, and I think that is something that we could take out of this, is that as economies begin to develop in particular areas, we need to deal with them immediately and prioritize them immediately before they become so entrenched.
Jenni, this is most certainly a very helpful report. We'll be looking to engage with law enforcement of what they plan to do with this, because it's quite disturbing. 1 minute it's in Cape Town and the next it will be in Johannesburg. But thank you very much for your time this evening. That is Transnational's Jenni Williams speaking to us.